Bloodborne. Okay, that's it, folks. That's the video. Thanks for coming out. Good night. I don't know about you, but when I look up at the moon on a clear night sky, two thoughts immediately flash into my mind. One, how the fuck did we even get up there? And two, that shit looks just like Bloodborne for real. The way my perception of reality has been warped by this one video game always takes me by surprise. In fact, there was a blood moon on March 3rd this year, and I drove up to a nearby footy oval, leaned on the railing, and craned my head up towards the cloudy, overcast sky. No moon in sight. I got there at 10 PM and waited for half an hour. Still nothing. But just as I decided to call it and walk back to my car, the clouds parted, revealing a singular red dot. The lunar eclipse was at its peak, the blood-washed surface gleaming ominously against the dark, and I stared at it for the next hour or so, entranced, as the Earth's shadow crept away almost imperceptibly, and the sanguine hue slowly faded from its quiet companion. What is there to say about Bloodborne that hasn't already been said? Its reputation precedes it in such a colossal fashion that its legacy has very much taken a life of its own. Undying debates about 30 FPS, PlayStation exclusivity, secret remasters, a clear desire to not revisit it from its creators. The discourse around this classic is never left well alone. In many ways, Bloodborne is the real Dark Souls 2. Hold on now, you already know how much I love Dark Souls 2, just go watch my video. But I think there's an obvious evolutionary bloodline expressed through Hidetaka Miyazaki's vision, from Demon Souls to Dark Souls 1 to Bloodborne to Sekiro, and then back again in Elden Ring. There's an inherent desire to experiment, to sharpen that magical FromSoft formula into new shapes, one that isn't afraid of reinvention, to innovate and forge something with both lineage and novelty. Dark Souls 2 is often regarded as an entirely separate entity under the creative direction of Tomohiro Shibuya and Yui Tanimura, riffing off the foundation set by Miyazaki's original, and it was a troubled sequel that landed on a palpably different yet genuinely fun game spurred on by a unique, adventurous spirit. Bloodborne, on the other hand, is Miyazaki through and through. The same oppressive charm found in Demon Souls and Dark Souls 1 saturates the horrific world of Yharnam, omnipresent in its brutal gameplay, esoteric narrative, and straight-up unmatchable atmosphere. This game feels like the natural next step after the dark fantasy masterpiece that is Dark Souls, waking in an ethereal gothic dream world defined both by the presence of beasts and the beast of industry. There is an unshackled nature to Bloodborne, a game that Miyazaki and his team were able to labor over and coax into existence without the pressures of creating a straight sequel to one of history's most influential games, though they would be tasked with that not long after. Here, they could craft an experience truly unlike any other, refining some elements, adapting new ones, and shedding old chains in their earnest pursuit for true perfection in the medium. And it would be an understatement to say their efforts didn't pay off. As usual, this video is part retrospective, part critique, but most importantly, it's a love letter to one of the undisputable best video games of all time, and an undeniable peak of fiction. A lot has been said about it, but I'm still drawn to add my voice to the choir. I want to explore what makes Yharnam so damn captivating, sing its well-deserved praises, critically analyze a few elements here and there, and gain true insight as to why this game continues to stay with me as it does so many others. This is my attempt to unveil a great one, to pull back the curtain and seek its true nature under a pale blood sky. A hunger to be fed and a curiosity to be sated. After all, a hunter must hunt. This is why I can't stop thinking about Bloodborne.
We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood.
I don't typically default to character role-playing games. In real life, it's a different matter. But when I saw the option to choose my character's origin as a lone survivor, the only remaining remnant of my hamlet that was razed to the ground, I can't lie but feel a bit of excitement at the idea. So here's our protagonist, Sir Shuang II, the far descendant of Sir Shuang of Drang Lake, who became that true monarch so many ages ago. This scholarly-looking fellow is haunted by a dark past, the sole survivor of the massacre in his home, and has come to Yharnam under the pretense of receiving blood ministration to cure his disease. But he is here in this accursed city for one thing only, to uncover the truth and seek vengeance against the healing church and their vicious actions that happened so long ago, in a distant fishing hamlet by the sea. This opening cutscene is fitting for Bloodborne's vibe. It's short, punchy, and doesn't play up the drama. There's more visual storytelling than there is spoken exposition, with a creepy Yharnam doctor administering your blood as you sign your life away to undergo this procedure. A ferocious beast crawls towards you, snarling, before being repelled and set aflame. Your subconscious fighting back the feral urge for now, before your body is claimed by the messengers, these chill little guys who have chosen you to become a hunter. Waking up in Yosefka's clinic, we get acquainted with our controls, and then I go and finally beat this monster first try after 5 minutes of dodging and retaliating. I've never done this before, so I expect some congratulations in the comments. Exiting the building and pushing open the gate brings us into central Yharnam proper, where the sun is hanging low in the sky and the entire world is bathed in an orange glow. Lighting the first lantern, we can return to the Hunter's Stream, a separate reality that houses a slumped-over doll, and Gurman, an old wheelchair-bound man who simply welcomes you and tells you to go kill a couple beasts, just like the good little hunter you are. Exploring this small space, consisting of a modest church and a couple gravestones outside, the dream is no Majula, but it is definitely a bit more aesthetic than the Firelink shrines. The overgrowth, the flowers, the way the moon beams down overhead, even the colossal arch trees that encircle this little island. It is all beautifully serene, literally set apart from the chaos of the outside world. The dream is a comforting reprieve, and you will spend a lot of time here, though its only inhabitants will forever be Gurman and a doll, who for now lies dormant near the steps. It is a lonely place, but a calming one. For now, we choose our weapon, and of course, a distinguished man must pick a distinguished weapon, and so we go with the threaded cane, my beloved. A stylish and iconic choice. I also go with the blunderbuss this time because I always choose the pistol when I wanted to use the shotgun for once. Sue me. With a gun in my left hand and my Trevor Belmont whip in my right, we are ready to touch the first headstone and head right back into this beastly scourge to get our hands dirty. Central Yharnam is easily one of the best levels FromSoft has ever made. Just like Undead Bug and DS1, this first brutal gauntlet embodies what these games do best, a multi-layered approach that grows in complexity and builds up your pathfinding skills. In fact, I argue that this map is basically Undead Bug 2. The verticality here is striking, immediately communicated by the vistas of great bridges, spiraling towers, and claustrophobic stratification. Yharnam is a city of industry, dense and layered and crowded, with buildings and structures built atop each other haphazardly. This lends itself to the confusing yet satisfying traversal of its environment, across main thoroughfares, up and down staircases, passing through residential apartments, crossing large bridges, descending down into its sewers. Unlike in Lordran or the lands between, where the world has effectively ended and fallen silent, the inhabitants of Yharnam are living through the onset of the apocalypse. There's a lived-inness that is so vivid and tangible, further enhanced by the presence of the city's residents, cowering behind closed doors and barred windows, cursing you or blessing you or clinging onto their sanity as this long night of the hunt begins. Even the way certain citizens have mobilized together with pitchforks and torches to patrol the streets, shouting at you to stay away before chasing you down with bloodthirsty intentions. There is a madness that is beginning to choke this city, and you are right in the middle of it. Central Yharnam is constructed in a way that encourages you to investigate every side path while retaining a sense of place, since each area is visually distinct by geography or architecture, actual districts of the city that have been clearly carved out. Dropping down the beams into the sewer system only to climb this extraordinarily long ladder that leads you across a small bridge and up another ladder, bringing you to the window of a little girl's house and a gate that opens back to the first section you explored. Its peak FromSoft level design. Physically linking the whole area together while mapping it out in your brain is grueling, and a perfect example of how the absence of a map pushes you to engage with the world in a cerebral way. You have to rely on your own internal compass, balance the cognitive load of traipsing around Central Yharnam while staying alive. It is deeply immersive, and this introductory level is a masterclass in how effective the lack of hand-holding can be in video games. You are pulled in by force, forging onwards with care and trepidation as to what you will find, knowing that linearity is not promised and thoroughness is rewarded. And this deep exploration is built primarily around a single lantern that you light at the start of the level. That's some classic Demon Souls shit right there. Another unsung feature of this area is the organic way in which it introduces the primary enemy archetypes you'll be facing throughout your journey. You have the standard human enemies that mob you close up or pelt you from range. You have animals to maneuver around in the form of diseased rats, fast-moving dogs, and loud fucking crows. Seriously, why are these birds so damn loud? You have the prowling beasts and the deadly lycanthropes that you engage with patience, and you have the lumbering, heavy-hitting brutes, whose movements incentivize you to interrupt and eliminate them quickly. This initial roster of foes forms the backbone of what you face throughout Yharnam, growing in strength, lethality, and transfiguration. Bloodborne's enemy diversity is impressive and extends all the way to the end of the game, embracing its horror tropes of fiends and ghouls and entities, but we're taught here the fundamentals of how to deal with them in a subtle and unobtrusive manner. Central Yharnam is an effective stage not only in how it prioritizes deliberate navigation with its looping design, but also with this diversity of enemies, a combination that is surprisingly complex for an opening area. This priming is reinforced again with the two bosses of the level. The first is the cleric beast who ambushes you on the Great Bridge, and is your introduction to the hardest type of enemy to deal with in the game, your camera. These large beast enemies, typically several times larger than the player, take up a lot of the screen, and can be incredibly hard to track due to the way the camera spazzes out when you are locked in or pushed into a corner. This boss fight quickly teaches you another core combat mechanic, unlocking your camera, which allows you to reposition yourself better without randomly snapping in the wrong direction. Although this de-emphasis of the lock-on is a habit you build throughout the game, I can't give this one too much credit, as this issue could be largely solved by zooming the camera out a bit, but FromSoft's dedication to keeping you close to the action, becomes a big part of the fight's difficulty as well. Despite that, the cleric beast is a fun and mechanically engaging first boss, its bestial form relying mostly on swipes and smashes that you can easily evade, as long as you don't lock on, get too close, and the camera is in your favor. With a bit of oil urn and Molotov combo, you can also deal a large chunk of fire damage to this monstrosity, and it isn't long before this overgrown mutt goes down, netting you an extra lantern in its arena. The second boss is already one of the game's most iconic, and quickly establishes how goated the boss roster in Bloodborne is. Father Gascoigne is a human, a seasoned hunter with access to the same tools as you, which means he will pepper you with bullets and stun-lock you with his trick weapon if you're not careful. We get a cold introductory scene for this veteran. Beasts all over the shop. The first phase of this fight rewards you for learning to parry, where you can interrupt Gascoigne's relentless attacks and punish him for huge damage. He is a great litmus test for your grasp on the combat so far, spacing and sidestepping between cover before closing in with aggression. Things take a turn when the beast erupts from within, transforming him into an animalistic terror. No longer a man, his movements are now feral and unpredictable, clawing and kicking his way through your health bar. If you play the music box that the little girl gave you at her window, you can stun her father for a moment, reminding him of his once human condition, but you show no mercy as you tear into him. Just as Gurman said, hunt a couple beasts. It's just what hunters do after all. This duo is genuinely fantastic and a strong start. It's the right amount of challenge while also dripping with lore, demonstrating the beastly scourge overtaking even the most zealous of hunters. Father Gascoigne is representative of the second boss archetype in this game, sad humanoids that you must put out of their misery. With the father put down, we get a moment to breathe amongst the gravestones as we light the lantern in the tomb of Oedon. And while this first mandatory boss fight was a brilliant showcase of the tense moment-to-moment gameplay, let's take a detour here and really dissect what makes Bloodborne's combat flourish. Building upon the fundamentals of Dark Souls 1, Bloodborne is some of the best action combat of any game ever. There's a clear direction and a palpable sense of refinement in FromSoft's approach here. While Sekiro eventually sharpened the formula to an absolute knife point, refined to its essentials, Bloodborne is still mostly familiar to its Souls brethren, but with a newfound focus on fluidity. The Soulsborne games tend to be defined by their dedication to friction, which presents itself both in the world with its constant obfuscation and lethality, as well as in its gameplay systems, like cycling through items and managing equipment load. In this franchise, there's a distinct level of discomfort and intentional mechanical awkwardness that forces you to grit your teeth and meet the game on its own terms, which in turn fosters a deeper sense of engagement. Here in Bloodborne, I argue that some of these rough edges have been sanded away for it to shine even brighter. That's not to say that all friction has been completely lost, as it's still very much baked into the level design and cruel runbacks, as is tradition. Rather, there's been an obvious streamlining in the core combat mechanics to allow for a tighter, more responsive gameplay loop. It still retains that same feel, but motivated to match the power fantasy of being a seasoned hunter. It is a natural evolution from the clunkier, weightier combat of DS1, utilizing the same broad strokes but adjusting the dials for a faster, more aggressive pace, and it works brilliantly. Bloodborne's combat and character movement is responsive, tactile, and satisfying. Rolling is still present, but sidestepping is prioritized as your main repositioning tool, and with the increased speed at which you execute all these abilities, Bloodborne has a much more frenetic yet precise pace. This desire to innovate on the formula while preserving certain fundamentals is an intrinsic part of Bloodborne's identity, and why it is so beloved, even when compared to the more complex Elden Ring sandbox or Sekiro's pursuit of pure action combat ecstasy. It exists in a sort of middle ground, one that is familiar and accessible, while increasing the intensity and speed of execution. Bloodborne still retains that core element of patience, embodying that turn-based groove from DS1 and DS2 by introducing volatility with interrupting and rallying, where you can cut short an enemy's turn by pushing the offensive. No longer are you a clunky knight lumbering through with sword and board, weighed down by your control scheme and legato movements. Instead, the approach here is more staccato, encouraging you to take quick steps and respond almost instinctively in return. This organic speed ties directly to the hunter's intuition, to your intuition, in how to move, how to space yourself, when to go in for the attack and when to hand back. There's a skill expression here that shortens the room to breathe and wants you to rely a bit more on instinct and reaction time, which is an obvious change of pace from something like Demon's Souls or DS1. The lineage of games can really be traced in this way, and it's clear that Miyazaki designed Bloodborne with this tightening of call and response in mind. FromSoft could have easily made Dark Souls in London and retained the slog, but instead they matched the combat rhythm to the power fantasy of the hunter, quick on your feet and navigating a gothic jungle full of predators and prey. The seeds laid here with Bloodborne's combat, the focus on that staccato style, the fluidity of the movements, and expanded sandbox of abilities, would all eventually grow into the sometimes clusterfuck nature of DS3 and to a lesser extent, Elden Ring. This DNA is present here in Bloodborne, but I argue that it's much less annoying in its nascency, due to its more forgiving enemy and encounter design. It introduces large open areas with dense mobs of enemies, but presents them in a manageable way that relies less on them overwhelming and swarming you. Off-screen ganks are also kept to a minimum, and stun-locking combos feel less prevalent here than they do in later entries, and by that I mean Dark Souls 3. I want to go a bit further in depth with the new gameplay mechanics that Bloodborne introduces, and how they elevate the combat sandbox. The first thing to discuss is shooting, because now in your left hand you typically carry a big-ass gun. One primary resource you rely on throughout the game are quicksilver bullets for your secondary weapon. These bullets are items that you must collect in the world or purchase with blood echoes, and they are deemed so vital that you're given the ability to sacrifice a chunk of health to conjure temporary blood bullets for you to use. This ammunition is key to your success in Yharnam, since shooting an enemy at the right time during their wind-up staggers them. This is Bloodborne's famous gun parry, or interrupt, and is denoted by an audible ding, a cue that brings with it cathartic satisfaction in a way that confirms your success, as the enemy falls to their knees and becomes vulnerable to a follow-up critical hit, known as a visceral attack. Interrupting is a vital skill in your toolkit, and essential for eliminating some of the tankier and harder-hitting enemies. I think it's underappreciated just how well this interrupt system is introduced to the player in the early game. These lumbering brute enemies are immediately intimidating and are incredibly lethal with their combos. Trying to face them with your standard attacks can get the job done, but will heavily rely on you dodging and weaving to stay alive. But by simply interrupting their clearly telegraphed moves, you stagger them and are able to deliver a visceral attack, which completely wipes them out, saving you both time and resources. This is never communicated to you with a text prompt or hint, but simply by testing your own knowledge. Utilizing and experimenting with the game's mechanics rewards you with new understanding, and you can take your learnings and apply it to all large enemies in the game. It is brilliant in its seamlessness and satisfying in its acquisition, equipping you with a newly honed skill, one that you're encouraged to improve as you progress through the game, as it becomes a well-worn technique in your hunter's arsenal. The satisfaction of a visceral attack as well, with its crunchy and bloody execution, is a reward in itself. Repulse are always fun to pull off in FromSoft games, and here the stylishness is maximized and elevated. This is later reinforced by equipable runes which can grant you health and bonus echoes when delivering a visceral attack, encouraging you to interrupt more so you can critically strike the enemy for a burst of healings or bullets while rewarding aggression. This tight feedback loop and layered mechanics is one of Bloodborne's strongest traits. Systems that build upon each other in ways that are not only fun in execution, but has the tense risk versus reward that forms the basis of every engagement. Every Soulsborne game has had a point of contention that becomes a lightning rod for debate, and for Bloodborne this is the blood vial situation. Your main source of healing in this game is through the use of said blood vials, which are positioned as a true consumable, one which can be infinitely farmed but you can also run out. In this playthrough I had little problem with the management of my vials. I'm familiar not just with the game, its mechanics and encounter design, but also now with the genre on the whole, which incentivized me to prepare and survive economically. With the right knowledge or disposition, you learn to be cautious, play it safe, and try not to waste blood vials. Since this was my approach, the majority of the game was spent never worrying about running out. Halfway through the game, I realized that to alleviate this potential problem further, I should spend my leftover echoes and vials in the hunter's dream. This pattern of leveling up and then restocking on vials, storing them away in small amounts like savings in a bank, meant my personal stockpile would gradually grow. I would argue that this habit isn't naturally inclined, since you're always more tempted to gain power than you are to spend on resources. But it does feel organic in the way this system is presented. Unlike the esters, the blood vials are not directly upgradable in potency and remain constant throughout the game. There's no progression here, and you start with the ability to carry 20 at a time, a very generous amount that replenishes from your reserves every time you return to the dream. The number of vials you can carry can be increased by equipping communion runes, up to a maximum of 24. But other than that, this healing system remains mostly stagnant. So while I think the blood vial system is generally sound and evolves in effectiveness over the course of your playthrough, not necessarily by receiving buffs but by becoming more aligned with your player level and growing reserves, I can also see how it might be too punishing in the earlier parts of the game. And while a more seasoned player might not typically struggle with vial management, there's an argument for the other camp, newer or returning players who might get blindsided by the game's difficulty and quickly run dry. This is compounded by the fact that early game farming for vials isn't a super viable strategy, especially when it's much more efficient to farm echoes to buy vials than to hunt them as drops. Here, blood echoes are your primary method of getting stronger, and having to use them to purchase vials is a cruel bargain for a less experienced player just trying to beat the cleric beast for the first time. A way to alleviate this burden would be to have a reverse blood bullet ability, where instead of sacrificing a portion of your health for temporary bullets that add on to your current supply, you could sacrifice quicksilver bullets to regain a couple blood vials. It might not make a lot of thematic sense, but it will allow you to convert a comparatively less important resource into one that you undoubtedly will need throughout the game. Beyond that though, could FromSoft have just made the blood vials mirror the Estus system, in that it automatically refills whenever you rest? Yeah, honestly, I think so. Though I appreciate the thematic implications of sourcing these finite, lore-heavy resources out in this nightmarish world, the online discourse around vials always returns to a simple question. How do I farm them, and what's the best place to do it? It feels like no matter how you play the game, you always end up crashing into this wall at some point, needing to step away from the boss you're trying to beat solely to farm echoes to buy more blood vials. In this playthrough, this moment primarily happened quite late in the game, while fighting the first boss of the DLC. But it did force me back to Murgo's loft to start a civil war between these pigs and the shadows repeatedly, accumulating echoes just to buy vials. Yes, I know this guy by the gate gives you 5 and he respawns, but it's just more efficient to execute the former and future-proof yourself. Sure, it only took maybe 20 to 30 minutes of farming this route to completely max out my entire 600 vial reserve, and not have to worry about it again for the rest of the game. But it was still time spent doing a pretty menial task. Having to disengage from a difficult boss to stab some pigs in the ass over and over, just to eke out more tries, feels like needless busy work for a single-player game where said bosses are the highlight. So while this scarcity only happened to me once or twice and was solved relatively quickly, these were also blood echoes that could have been invested in my stats or purchasing weapons or new drip from the shop. Ultimately, I believe that Bloodborne would be better served by having blood vials replenish upon returning to the dream. Unlike something like Elden Ring with a more open-ended approach to power and exploration that encourages detours and occasionally grinding levels, Bloodborne's general linearity means you typically only run low on vials when smashing your head against a difficult boss. Rather than needing a combination of life gems and flasks in DS2 or pallets and gourds in Sekiro, Bloodborne can operate entirely on this vial economy, infinitely refreshing upon death. Getting blood vials from mobs would still work well, since that drop rate provides sustenance for the level, but doesn't shortchange you when learning and losing to the area boss. I can appreciate the friction it introduces, but it can be particularly punishing early in the game without any reward for mastering or upgrading it, foregoing the ability to purchase stronger versions or upgrading your base healing, outside of joining a specific covenant which you might not want to be part of. Beyond the blood vial mechanic, healing is also supplemented by the rallying system, where enemy attacks remove an amount of your health bar before you take the hit as actual damage, allowing you a small window to land your own hits to negate the potential damage, sometimes completely. This active healing encourages you to rally with your opponent, pushing the aggression right after they successfully attack you so as to regain your ground and launch a counter-attack. Just like visceral attacks, your rallying potential can be boosted by runes, and it's just another example of Bloodborne's focus mechanics folding on top of each other, where each system weaves together to form an impressively cohesive combat framework, one that has clear avenues for expression while still prioritizing skill overall. This can sometimes be a bit of a trap though, and the desire to rally can collide with the necessity of being cautious. Bloodborne is a fast-paced and dynamic game, one where taking the offensive is the preferred strategy, but boss fights in particular still demand that old FromSoft patience and timing. Falling into overconfidence and trying to regain your footing by punishing enemies often leads you to getting blitzed by follow-ups. So while trash mobs are often safe to rally with, Bosses still demand the awareness and the 1-2-3 back-away combat rhythm that these games tend to build around. Of course, what would a FromSoft game be without its weapon sandbox? Rather than sheer density and diversity, Bloodborne instead, as evident in all other facets of its construction, knuckles down. There is a clear restraint on display here, with the game only providing a total of 26 unique trick weapons and 12 firearms, compared to the roughly 130 weapons of Dark Souls 1 or close to 200 weapons of Dark Souls 3. But it is this approach that truly allows each armament to shine, where each tool is well defined and memorable for their versatility and lethality. You could choose any as your favorite weapon and it would be perfectly reasonable. All items have a standard moveset in their base form, with light, heavy, and charge attacks mapped with a familiar weight depending on its type. But complexity and expression are introduced when you transform your weapon with the left bumper, shifting its moveset and giving you access to a completely different set of attacks. Transforming your weapon allows you to extend combos and adds to the combat rhythm, switching back and forth and chaining attacks with a flourish that is just super fucking cool. The threaded cane is a prime example of this versatility in the game, a sophisticated choice for a sophisticated man. In its untransformed state, it's a simple cane with a short reach and fast slashes that allow you to stun lock enemies and react quickly. But when you transform it, it extends out into a serrated whip and you become Trevor Belmont himself. The attacks are slower, but the huge increase in range and crowd control ability is undeniable, letting you space yourself and lacerate enemies from a distance. These two forms and your freedom to switch between them immediately provides you variety in the moment-to-moment gameplay, adapting to the needs of each encounter on the go. Another great one is Ludwig's Holy Blade, with a short sword that transforms into a great sword that can deliver incredible charge poking attacks, or the Right to Palash, a rapier that can fire off quicksilver bullets in its transformed state, empowering you with a second firearm to decimate enemy hunters with interrupts. My personal favorite, and the one that brought me through the endgame, is the Beast Hunter's Scythe, a slow-hitting scythe that transforms into a brutal close combat blade, with the distinct ability to lunge at the enemy with your transformed light attack. This gap closer feels so good to execute, to the point where switching back to a different weapon always took adjusting, as if this lunge was already naturally baked into your combat movement. Once I had it in my hands, it was hard to put down for anything else. That's the Beast Hunter's Scythe supremacy. These two weapon states, transformed and untransformed, essentially doubles the number of weapons in this game, while also giving each one a clear identity. They are fun, stylish, and fittingly complex, living up to their name as trick weapons. This novel approach to weapon variety, with each arm providing a dual set of offensive options, is elevated further by the fact that you can equip two trick weapons at any time. Bloodborne makes the brilliant decision to remove equipment load completely. There's no need to worry about weapon or armor weight, empowering you to equip whatever combination of weapons and firearms you like to suit your playstyle. This freedom is incredible in that you can experiment with whatever tools you like, without obsessing over roll speeds or being encumbered. Switching between crowd control and single target DPS goes unpunished and is instead encouraged. As much as I love the build variety present in the other Souls games, the lightweight and speedy nature of the Hunter is defined by this lack of load, literally unburdened by the need to account for realistic stamina and weight costs. Also benefiting from this dismissal of equipment load, fashion is at an all-time high in Bloodborne, and you can dress yourself in whatever drip catches your eye. In large part due to the Victorian Gothic style and accoutrements, the clothing in this game and the fits you can pull off are on another plane of existence. It trades the medieval, bulky knight's armor with its dark fantasy tinge for a completely different aesthetic, one of cloth and capes and raised collars and flowing garments. The drip here is immaculate, from the charred hunter set with its Batman Arkham-esque shiny flowing cape, to the heavily robed executioner garb and its distinct white coloring, to the feathery stylings of the crow set, gifting you a pair of dark wings as the hunter of hunters. Even the base hunter set with its short cape has immediate aura, and embodies the unmatched art direction Bloodborne is renowned for. There is a decent range of pieces to choose from, and each outfit delivers a unique style for the player, and having that shit on is not constrained at all by equipment load. You simply get to wear what calls to you, and there are a lot of cool fits to pick from throughout Yharnam. Just like its weapons, the game presents a limited yet impressive array of options, and I found myself constantly switching up my style to mark different points in the game just for the fun of it. This cool factor is further boosted by how bloody you get as you mow down your monstrous foes, with your outfit starting pristine when you arrive in an area, and very quickly getting soaked in the viscera and the sanguine, grimy with blood seeping into your clothes and dyeing you as a slaughterer of prey. This is even more evident on the lighter colored outfits like the choir garb and the white church set, where your penchant for violence literally washes over you and leaves the original fabric almost unrecognizable. This growing level of blood, and the way FromSoft displays its viscosity as it clings to you, is an underappreciated detail that further immerses you in the relentless world of Bloodborne, a constant reminder of your actions even in moments of reprieve. That feeling of slaughtering a boss, only for a rain of blood to shower down as you stand triumphant. Your clothes smeared and heavy with a dark crimson that can only be born from your unassailable desire to hunt. Speaking of hunting, let's go feed that hunger and seek out some more monstrosities. Pushing open the door to Oedon Chapel, we arrive in our primary nexus, a safe haven from the hellscape outside. The chapel dweller welcomes you, a kindly fellow who encourages you to find other survivors and bring them to this shelter. The chapel is much more firelink shrine coded than the lonely hunter's dream, physical space within the world that will slowly become populated with various NPCs, as long as you're a halfway decent person. Whether it's the cranky old grandma in central Yharnam, the sheepish nun Adela you saved from the Hypogean jail, or Ariana, the provocative lady of the night, these characters can take up residence here if you choose to disclose its location, or you can opt to send them to the super suspicious Yosefka at her clinic and never see them again. Saving these NPCs is vital in fleshing out the world of Yharnam, though I'll argue that these characters don't always have particularly cathartic payoffs, nor do you really get emotionally invested in any of them. This is mainly due to how dire the circumstances are and how everything skews towards misery and pain rather than fostering any sense of optimism and connection. This is congruent with the tone of Bloodborne, but it's hard to root for much when everything is so awful all the time. You have the little girl by the window in central Yharnam, who tells you of her mother who has gone out searching for her father, and hands you a music box to play his favorite tune. We already know how this plays out in Gascoigne's fight, and we retrieve the woman's brooch from a corpse, flung violently onto the roof. Returning to the girl, you can choose to remain silent about her parents' deaths and send her, with some glimmer of hope, towards the haven of the chapel. She embarks on this quest alone, and when you kill the man-eating boar in the sewers not far from her, you can find the bloody remains of her white bow, her young life reduced to this cruel effigy. Even worse, when you return later in the game, the girl's sister greets you instead, worrying about where her entire family have gone. When you hand over the bloody bow, we overhear the girl expressing a gruesome joy over her sister's horrible fate, perhaps driven mad by the plague. Returning to the area, you can find a corpse at the base of the ladder, having made little progress even compared to her little sister, and you can pick up a suspiciously clean bow from a lifeless body, and then the questline is over. Vignettes like this do an effective job of capturing the merciless nature of Yharnam, but the level of suffering can sometimes climb to the point of absurdity that you slowly become apathetic to it. It almost slips into the comical. Another example is Ariana, a prostitute that you can rescue and send to the chapel who offers you her blood, seemingly menstrual in nature. Take it 3 times and Adela, the holy sister you saved from the unseen village, who also offers you what she dolefully considers her tainted blood, will murder Ariana out of blind jealousy. Watching her stare at your interactions from a little corner, looking over with envy, is always a bit unnerving. If you avoid this outcome by not taking Ariana's blood and keeping her rival at bay, Ariana will begin to suffer from contractions as the night progresses. This eventually leads her to vanish from the chapel entirely, and following the trail of blood back down into the watery undercroft near the tomb of Oedon, you find Ariana, face buried in shame as a newborn celestial child looks up at her expectantly. It's a solemn sight, this traumatized mother weeping at her unwanted child. This story is concluded as you strike the pair down, earning you Ariana's shoes and 1/3 of an umbilical cord, a precious thing that pushes you towards the game's true ending. This questline, playing out across the night, is straight up miserable and ends with death by your hand. A mercy maybe, but it doesn't really feel like it. But this violence against an innocent woman and a child feels quite monstrous when I reflect back on it. I understand the overarching intention, but I won't lie that it can be quite jarring in its hopelessness, and leaves you quite emotionally hollow. Other questlines like Eileen the Crow, a seasoned hunter of hunters, and Alfred, an executioner searching for his master Logarius, are definitely more substantial and serve a clearer purpose, but I'll comment further on these characters as they come up. Even in their conclusion, however, I feel that they pale in comparison to something more intimate like your friendship with Solaire in DS1, or the more whimsical battle bond with Jugo and the Detective-esque storyline with Lucatel in DS2, or even the constant presence and monologuing of Eldia. Dark Souls 2 was particularly memorable in this regard, and I feel like it set the bar for NPC interactions and questlines, whether in the more personal moments or the scripted invasions, leveraging emotional motivation to progress their compelling stories. Here, it's mostly reduced to exhausting dialogue and checking back in every now and then everybody dying a horrific and meaningless death, which suits the narrative, sure, but a bit more variety would have been nice. Surprisingly, one of the more moving storylines is the one with the chapel dweller, despite it not really having a proper conclusion. After sending everybody you can to the chapel, the dweller will open up to you and sheepishly ask if after this long night, the two of you could be friends. I thought this moment was really cute, showcasing a rare vulnerability and softness in this world. The dweller is kind of scary looking, but he's genuinely a good guy trying to redeem himself, and I felt a sense of kinship bloom through our shared, earnest efforts. He's a good lad, wanting to do what he can in these hopeless times. Ultimately, these little vignettes all add to the perverse appeal of the game's harrowing atmosphere. Though it can be a bit too grim at times, for the residents of Yharnam, there is often no respite, no recourse, just bloodshed and a swift death waiting around the corner. Following the phenomenal tone and structure that is central Yharnam, Cathedral Ward cements Bloodborne's compelling level design with absolute confidence, and it's only the second area. Cathedral Ward is the central spoke of the wheel, a diegetic level select that allows you to choose your next adventure without the use of menus. Oedon Chapel itself is a microcosm of this bigger area, with exits to the north, east, and west all leading to different regions within the ward. This is expanded into branching paths that diverge at the entrance to the Grand Cathedral, its looming architecture casting a large shadow over the populace. Moving through the world and accepting the contract that the game offers, one where methodical engagement synergizes with your lizard gamer brain, Bloodborne undoubtedly becomes a comfy game, though not as much as the breezy Dark Souls 2 and definitely more so than the unrelenting intensity of Sekiro. There is at once a low drumming anxiety as you push forward, which melds with your natural inclination to get lost in its world. You are enveloped by its push and pull, almost like being carried along by the current that convinces you to stop struggling. That beautiful FromSoft magic is alive and well here, and it's working overtime. Bloodborne can be a brutally difficult game, and beyond the fact that deaths due to recklessness is inevitable for the average player, the game really taxes your brain each time you map out and navigate an area for the first time. Or it can devolve into plain stupidity like falling down to this tiny ledge that leads to the Healing Church workshop, giving me Pit of Saints flashbacks from Dark Souls 2. This jump button setup never fails to disappoint. Old Yharnam is a level goes 3 for 3, and builds upon the strengths of Central Yharnam, except here you have the retired Hunter Jura firing down at you with a machine gun from atop his tower. This introduces a tense element to the exploration as you descend down the level, which becomes more of a frantic approach, herding enemies into corridors to cut your way through. It's a welcome change of pace from the slower, more exploratory areas before, evading Jura's stream of bullets and the crowds of roaming beasts. The story of this area centers around the once proud Powder Keg Hunter, defecting from his post and swearing to protect the denizens of Old Yharnam from further persecution, a district that has been quarantined and burnt down due to the outbreak of the Scourge. Of course, the creatures themselves were all once ordinary citizens, as you would expect, confirming the true nature of Yharnam's affliction, the old blood is turning men into beasts. I like that the game never dwells on this as a dramatic plot twist or even a point worth elaborating on through a series of cutscenes. This is the simple truth, laid bare for all to see, and it's delivered effortlessly through environmental storytelling, NPC dialogue, and enemy design. Old Yharnam presents this tragic outcome, a section of the city abandoned and condemned, and you see the miserable state of affairs as you traverse this level. It's also a great transition here as you descend into the lower parts of the city, which is eerily quiet save a few beasts prowling around. The blood-starved beast that sits at the bottom of this forsaken town is a challenging fight, but I've always been more shocked by its repulsive appearance, its flayed skin flapping wildly as it spits poison everywhere. Shit is pretty raw. This boss fight, like the cleric beast, encourages you to utilize your items, demonstrating the effectiveness of tossing a pungent cocktail to lure it away, and then using the fire paper to set your weapon alight and go ham. Bloodborne's early game focus on items is something I overlooked when I first played the game, but I can appreciate how it organically pushes you in that direction. Blood-starved beasts can be a challenging fight, but by actively making use of your toolkit, whether that be oil urns, molotovs, antidotes, or pungent cocktails, hunting beasts becomes a more predictable affair, building up your confidence as the night progresses and your prey become more deadly. Speaking of deadly, you start to come across these terrifying kidnappers, who at this point hit like absolute trucks and are very tough to take down. Their looming, hooded forms move toward you slowly, stalking you, and you're likely to die to them even if you muster the courage to engage them. And when you do get killed, you're greeted with one of Bloodborne's greatest surprises. Instead of dying, you are instead hit with an unexpected cutscene, bag over your head as you wake up in a cell, disoriented and confused. In a game so unwilling to provide context, this creepy introduction to the Hypogean jail is a brilliant blindside, forcing you to undertake this area with little understanding as to what the fuck is happening. Nothing quite captures the dread you feel the first time this happens to you, similar to the chest in Elden Ring that warps you to the hellhole that is Caelid with no way back, leaving you to be mauled by oversized dogs as you try to escape. Here, it's a bit more forgiving as you freely explore the jail, though the loud, ominous soundtrack is unexpectedly incessant, blaring in the background as you try to navigate your way back to safety. Also, this place hikey fucking sucks. The terror continues to mount as you deal with kidnappers, dogs, pigs, enemies that are all nightmares to fight. There's annoying aggravation present here that I felt was generally absent from DS1 and DS2, due to them being straight up easier and enjoyable, but heavily dominates DS3. There's an oppressive difficulty due to enemy placement and ferocity that quickly turns into annoyance. In Bloodborne, it's still manageable and feels fair, and the reduced enemy density and aggression prevents it from devolving into a constant stunlock fest, though it definitely occurs at some points. You can really see how that foundation is being laid down here. Luckily, the Dark Beast Power boss fight is fucking sick. Its massive skeletal form surging with electricity is such a gnarly visual, and feels so far removed from what you expect from a beast that the coolness factor is immediately amped up. What doesn't hit hard here is you, wrestling with the camera to maneuver under and around Pyle to hack away at its limbs, but the perspective can't really accommodate the boss's size and the closed-off arena limits your spacing options. Pyle's not an unreasonable fight, but the Dark Beast's faster movements, massive shape, and wonky camera do not mix well, and is a problem that rears its head throughout the game. Also, I couldn't finish Jura's questline no matter what I did, spawning in from the graveyard lantern and making my way up to him without killing any beasts. I gave up and just put him down, or more like he put himself down by rolling off the tower. Classic Jura. If there was an award for the most lame and off-putting name FromSoft has ever given an area, it might actually be Hemwick Charnel Lane. What the fuck is a Charnel Lane? There's just something so pedestrian and nondescript about it, but I do like the classic gothic horror atmosphere it revels in by being a scary village filled with freaks, much in the vein of Resident Evil 4. Other than that, it's not the most memorable level, and I hate to admit this, but I actually died once to the Witches of Hemwick this time because I forgot what the mechanic for the boss was. Shameful, I know. With all these side paths dealt with, we can return to the Grand Cathedral, where we're treated to a cutscene of a praying woman transforming violently and with explosive force into a surprisingly elegant looking beast. Despite Vicar Amelia's size, she moves slowly and predictably, and applying everything we've learned hunting her beastly brethren up to this point, setting your weapon alight with fire paper and slashing away brings her down quick. As if to signify the devout vicar's death, you step outside of the Grand Cathedral to see that night has now truly fallen over Yharnam. Back in the dream, the doll tells me she thinks she loves me, which is easily one of the highlights of this game. Before we keep going further, let's take stock of the new upgrades that have been made available to us. Bloodborne's weapon upgrade system might be the most enjoyable in the series. It's streamlined, lightweight, exploration focused, and makes every weapon equally approachable and viable. It eliminates the need for alternative upgrade materials, simplifying the entire process by focusing entirely on bloodstones. This change is a godsend, and it reduces the unnecessary friction in a way that allows players more expression and freedom in their weapon choice. Bloodstone shards, your initial upgrade material, can be found in abundance as you carefully comb through the early game levels. This means you can easily fortify any weapon from +0 to +3, encouraging you to experiment early on to see which trick weapon might suit your playstyle and be worth investing in, without immediately funneling you into a single direction. The next tier of materials needed for +4 to +6, twin bloodstone shards, are prevalent in this mid-game section we're about to discuss, especially from the Forbidden Woods onwards. And the final +7 to +9 material bloodstone chunks remain rare at this point, but the availability of +0 to +6 upgrades is generous and player-centric, and is one of my favorite elements of Bloodborne mechanically. I always found the hunting of mats, and especially alternative mats, a tedious process in other games in the franchise, scattered far and wide in hard-to-reach places across the world. While it incentivizes a type of scale and sequence breaking, the chore of upgrading often collides against the desire to experiment and willingly try new weapons. Even the quality of life improvement of making the wandering nightmares, the little crawling guys that drop valuable loot, take longer to despawn helps ease this annoyance of gathering materials. By the endgame, my main arsenal consisted of the Threaded Cane, Ludwig's Holy Blade, Rider Palash, and the Beast Hunter's Scythe, with adequate materials thrown organically to fortify them through my playthrough. The final +10 material, the Blood Rock, can be found much later in the Nightmare of Mensis, with another found in the DLC. The Insight Bath Messengers also begin selling an unlimited number of Blood Rocks for 60 insight apiece, a resource you will gain organically from your exploration of the Chalice Dungeons in the endgame. Improving weapons is the primary avenue for getting stronger, alongside leveling up with Blood Echoes, but the ability to increase your damage output is also supplemented by the Blood Gem system. This unobtrusive addition allows you to slot differently shaped materia into your weapons, providing buffs like percentage damage increases, switching the elemental damage, or adding other bonus effects. The number of gem slots increase as you upgrade your weapon, maxing out a total of 3 gem slots, with a varying combination of gem shapes that it can incorporate. While this starts off mostly inconsequential and you casually deck out your best weapon with the most powerful gems you've amassed, this secondary system ends up outscaling the raw damage increase from simply fortifying your weapons. But that's something to only worry about in the endgame for optional optimization. For now, adding gems to your weapons is a straightforward, lightweight way to get stronger, one that doesn't require much heavy investment, but provides a meaningful system that remains unique to Bloodborne. It's like a watered-down version of the loot game in Neo 2, offering a chase that you can mostly ignore in your first playthrough, but can potentially become your main time sink as you prep for further New Game Plus cycles. In a similar vein, you're also able to equip 3 Carol runes on your character, with each providing certain buffs like holding extra vials of bullets, healing you up from visceral attacks, or more echoes from enemies. Again, these offer what amount to marginal benefits in your moment-to-moment gameplay, but the pursuit of higher tier versions of specific runes enables minor character building and leading into your preferred playstyle, with options for offense, defense, and sustainability. You can also equip an Oath rune in your 4th slot, tied to a specific faction and providing unique buffs like improved healing from vials or increased stamina recovery speed. Just like the Carol runes refining the ring system, these Oath runes add a small but tangible benefit to the typical Covenant badges. Much like the game's focused combat mechanics, these upgrade systems are well tuned and all fold upon each other seamlessly, with your sourcing of blood shards, gems, and runes occurring naturally throughout your exploration, providing you discrete paths to become great without getting bogged down by details and derailing you from your journey. Speaking of, let's get back to our quest to seek the Byrgenwerth spider. I always think of the Forbidden Woods as the sequel to Hemwick Charnel Lane, with its haunted forest vibe and nightmare traversal. I've always loved the way the door here opens, but the guard you were just talking to appears to have been long dead. It's just some spooky and tropey fun, but it has an unexpected whimsy that always sticks in my mind. Though it's not a hard level in terms of the enemies you fight, the expansive, snaking paths of this Lost Wood, with its purposefully samey aesthetic, applies huge cognitive pressure while exploring its terrain. This area demands awareness and patience in equal measure, an amount absent up to this point, allowing slow progress through its dense foliage as you clear each branching section one by one. Mapping it out is arduous and not always rewarding in terms of the items you find, but this challenge is FromSoft at their most masochistic and genius. The woods is a nice departure from the urban environment, populated by grotesque parasitic snakes, infesting lost Yarmanites and tangled up in slithering masses. Even nature has taken on this horrific, unexplainable quality, warped by the unknown and the unseen. The shadows of Yharnam that punctuate the level are also a really great trio boss, where tension is continuously achieved with their aggression and them outnumbering you, but is made reasonable by the cadence at which they actually attack. It is fair and generally quite fun. A far better and enjoyable pace versus the gimmicky witches. Fuck the witches. Passing through the lecture hall and into the Nightmare Frontier is our first taste of the latent cosmic horror bubbling under the narrative surface. Upon exiting the cave, you can look out at the strange, unnatural sight far down the cliff. The broken mass of ships litter the fog, melting into an illusory sea that hints at something beyond our comprehension. Looking up, you can see the spires of Yharnam, clearly not existing in physical space, but more a representation of how this nightmare is sandwiched between layers of reality. This is reinforced by the truly alien nature of this place. The Nightmare Frontier is just that, a frontier to an almost sci-fi hellscape, teeming with strange flora and fauna. This Elseworld is FromSoft's clearest attempt at something alien, where the environment has become inverted, uncanny, beyond human, as if situated on an entirely different planet. The beasts that roam here act intelligently at first, before surging with electricity and reverting back into their beastly form, reminiscent of Parry back in Old Yharnam. This place also introduces the Winter Lanterns, possibly the single worst enemy FromSoft has ever made. My absolute disdain for this ridiculous foe is beyond what I can express, but whenever they appear, my day is inevitably ruined. Their creepy singing, the sadistic build-up of frenzy, and the fact that you tend to fight them in these cramped and closed spaces make them a nightmare to deal with. Attempting to stun lock them with fast attacks can easily go wrong if you fail to dodge their stupid grab. All my homies hate Winter Lanterns, and this won't be the last time we see them either. The tediousness of this area, trekking through the poison swamp, dealing with borderline unkillable enemies, getting baited by spider patches. It's basically all of Miyazaki's favorite things rolled into one unbearable slog. Everything about the Nightmare Frontier is annoying, and though the boss fight against Amygdala is a cool spectacle, it's hardly a challenge and brings this shitty area to a rather anticlimactic close. Fortunately, leaving the frontier behind, the weakest and most agonizing level so far, we get to go kill the fake Yosefka at a clinic and steal the Kanehurst summons letter. which we can bring to the crossroads in Hemwick Charnel Lane. Out of nowhere, a ghostly carriage drawn by horses arrives and its cabin door swings open ominously, inviting you in. I love how much Bloodborne plays up these tropey moments. Riding through the snow, we end up at the foot of Forsaken Cain's castle, a massive fortress that stands isolated off the coast, the supposed home of the Vial Bloods, basically a coven of vampires. You turn around to find the horses that brought you here long dead, their corpses frozen over. Even the bridge that you crossed to get here has completely collapsed, as if you've passed the threshold into the castle's cursed existence. This eerie opening sticks with you as you approach the looming gate, which opens to invite you in. Cain's castle is one of my favorite places in the entire game. It's not a particularly difficult or even long dungeon, but its atmosphere and presentation is unmatched. A haunted castle that sits tortured and vacant, except for disgusting blood-sucking beasts with bloated bellies, meat caretakers, living gargoyles, and the countless ghosts of murdered Valblood nobles, their crying and shrieking echoing through its halls. Everything about the castle is unnerving, and moving through this desolation, the site of some gruesome macabre campaign, hits all the horror staples and really cements Bloodborne in its gothic identity. The ghastly female figures hint at the bloody history of the place, and this underlying mystery comes to a head when you arrive at the castle's roof and meet the fabled martyr Logarius. Responsible for the massacre that has befallen the Valbloods, Logarius rises from his seat of power, moving in a state of undeath, his gaunt skeletal body creaking to life as if in defense of something. I love this boss battle, the ambiance, the unexpectedness, Logarius' blood magic and haunting appearance. His fast attacks punish your callousness, and the way he shotguns you with floating skulls as you get close is cool as hell. I struggle against the martyr, dying multiple times, which forced me to switch up my playstyle to be more patient, bait out attacks, take advantage of openings, and then the fight became a lot easier. Turning up the aggression while hunting beasts and relying more on cunning while fighting humans ties in perfectly with the rhythm and tone of the game. With Logarius properly dead, we meet with Annalise, the immortal queen of the Valbloods. The leader of the executioners had set himself here to stop anybody from seeking an audience with the queen, following the church's orders to extinguish their accursed bloodline and become martyred in the process. Speaking of Annalise as memorable, what's even better is right after when you report your discovery to Alfred, and casually pass him an unaddressed Cainhurst summons, his ticket to glory. When you return to the throne room, Alfred is in full executioner gear, covered in blood, his torturer's wheel in hand, laughing maniacally at the splattered remains of the Valblood queen, her flesh smeared across the floor and throne. The executioner stands triumphant, celebrating his personal fulfillment of his master Logarius' mission. It's such an unhinged scene that burns itself into your memory, especially when you realize that the flesh on a chair is still subtly pulsing, and you can grab the half-living lump and pocket it for later. When you return to Alfred's original location, you find him dead in front of Logarius' statue, and that's the payoff for his questline. Like I said, Bloodborne doesn't deliver much more nuance when it comes to these NPC stories. Rest in peace, Alfred. Thanks for the wheel. Traveling past the Forbidden Woods and into Byrgenwerth proper, we come face to face with another significant figure, Master Willem, rocking gently in his chair. From the lunarium, the pale moon looms large and hangs low, close to the water's surface. This serene sight contrasts with the overwhelmingly sepulchral tone so far, bringing to mind the ways in which Bloodborne is a true spiritual sequel to Dark Souls 1. Whereas DS1 centers around the sun and fire, Bloodborne inverts this with a focus on the moon and on water. It carves out its own identity in this way, almost like a retelling of that familiar tale, a reflection, where one was steeped in the medieval past, in the tradition of old gods, false prophecies, and fallen kingdoms. The other is more contemporaneous, following the advent of industry and closer to the modern day, in a Victorian-inspired city plagued by disease, feral beasts, and cosmic forces. Bloodborne deviates from Dark Souls with a clear architectural and stylistic departure, showing us a world on the brink of collapse, rather than an untended graveyard haunted by undeath and loneliness. We are experiencing the apocalypse as it happens. Instead of passive rot and languishing decay due to stagnation and inaction, Yharnam is corrupted by the active extraction of resources, pillaging of previous civilizations and unchecked self-destruction. Rather than the sun setting or the fire fading and sputtering, there is a troubling metamorphosis at work, embodied by the phases of the moon and the movement of water, a duality which will rise even closer to the surface in the game's DLC. The paternalistic and patriarchal domination of Gwyn, the Lord of Sunlight, his fragile masculinity dooming his world, his Age of Fire standing in stark contrast to the visceral femininity of Bloodborne and the fabled Queen Yharnam, a dominion defined by childbearing and conception and menstruation. These divine matriarchal elements are foundational to the world, paradoxically serrated yet soft, able to heal and transform, to grant life and take it away. This maternal quality is less glaring and more vesperal, invisibly yet actively influencing all like the moon and the tide. Compared to the sun and the raw tangibility of fire, the moon is often more elusive, sometimes hidden and secreted away, not always easy to find, just as water fills a vessel and slips through your fingers. Here, at this precipice, we can gaze upon both forces together, the moon in its luminescent, reflective majesty, and the watery surface below with its ephemeral and formless nature. Take a good look at this final glimpse of normality, hit Master Willem until it disappears, and then plunge down into the resplendent, moonlit abyss below. There isn't much to say about Rom the vacuous spider, skittering about mindlessly in this watery domain with all of her children. She is a genuine great one, ascended from a human, but the oceanic imagery here is fitting when you consider that Rom was seemingly granted this power by Kos, or some say Cosm, who we will come to learn more about later. But in exchange for this elevated existence, Rom is left rather brainless, and so is this boss fight really. With Rom dead, we run across the endless expanse and approach the ghostly figure of a woman dressed in white, staring up at the sky, hands clasped in prayer. Queen Yharnam has granted us an audience. The blood moon has descended. It's at this point that everything coalesces. More accurately, the truth of the world is unveiled, revealed, the boundaries blurred entirely. The Byrgenwerth spider's meek existence was holding back the influences of myriad great ones, and with that barrier gone, Yharnam is thrown into chaos. Bloodborne dramatically transcends from its gothic roots into something entirely different. Absolute cosmic terror. This convergence is one of the game's most memorable twists, genre-bending and thoroughly insane. When I first played Bloodborne, I, like many, assumed that its dark romanticism, with all the trappings and tropes of decaying castles, werewolves, vampires, and ghosts, would be the be-all and end-all of its narrative. So when this tonal change hits, having festered in the background with the increasing strangeness of your journey, it feels as if the world has been skinned of its veneer and ignominy, exposing the real flesh and bone underneath. This is the clear turning point into the Eldritch. The Great Ones themselves are no longer hiding, their presence on full display. The sky burning with unnatural intensity and the blood moon hanging low. Spindly amygdalas like the one you face in the Nightmare Frontier can now be perceived, clinging to the outsides of buildings, keeping watch, acting as limbs of a larger entity that has made the entirety of Yharnam its plaything. Entering Yahar'gul, the unseen village, we find it overrun by these corpse piles spilling out of coffins, dragging their mangled masses across the streets, as if the blood moon itself has woken the dead and animated these grotesque amalgamations of flesh. This is the fruit of the kidnappers' actions, spiriting away their prey to the Hypergean jail, with the unseen village attempting to combine the populace of Yharnam into these monstrosities in the pursuit of something greater. There's a very recognizable through line here with the shamans and jar saints, the grafting and melding of bodies together to birth new life. The One Reborn is the culmination of these efforts. All the citizens of the town smash into a horrific tarring mass, and its intro cutscene really cements that this is something excessively unnatural, birthed into the world through an imperfect ritual. The imagery of the blood moon being covered by a foe one, a portal of miasma delivering this failed great one into the realm of the living, almost prematurely. Harkening back to the Tower Knight and Demon Souls, you run up to the balcony and eliminate all the witches, before going down to do battle against this fake god. Its numerous appendages and limbs and desperate thrashing are no match for you as you slaughter what amounts to just another beast in this long night of the hunt. It's no true great one, that's for sure. Returning to the entrance of the Grand Cathedral, Eileen the Crow lies bloody, clutching her side, warning you that a terrible foe lies ahead and tries to dissuade you from proceeding. The concern is valid, because the bloody crow of Cainhurst that waits in there is outright one of the hardest battles in this game. He is a NPC hunter wielding a Chikage and repeating pistols, using quickening to bloodhound step around the cathedral. The crow moves so quickly and so aggressively that you finally met your match, and it's poetic that it's another hunter, one renowned solely for his deadliness. I got obliterated by this guy so many fucking times I ran out of blood vials and I had to go farm some, which is never a good sign. His ability to punish you with his pistol when you get too close and the range of his blood slashes forces you to play more tactically, throwing numbing mist to stop him from healing, not getting baited by every opening, punishing when he commits hard. It's a desperate dance, a duel between two seasoned hunters, but with my trusty Rite of Palash in hand, doing my best to stunlock the crow, I come out on top after many attempts. The reward for this is the best Blood Rapture rune, allowing me to heal a large chunk of health from visceral attacks, as well as a most welcome ending to an NPC questline in the game, perhaps the only happy one if you wish it to be. When you return to the steps of the cathedral, Eileen is gone, leaving behind only a blood splatter. The old woman clung on to her humanity all the way to the end. She was a true hunter of hunters, maintaining her sanity, but she also confesses to feeding on the blood as she lay there mortally wounded. With no corpse to be certain whether she is out there somewhere, woman or beast, we can only hope she survives her fate. Ascending to the top of Cathedral Ward, wait, I forgot the Upper Cathedral Ward key. After retrieving the Upper Cathedral Ward key from Yargul, we gain access to the choir's headquarters and the orphanage, where the church raised young children to hear the voices of the Great Ones. I remember always struggling with the brain suckers here with their stupid stun and grab attack, but it wasn't really a problem this time. The Celestial Emissary is also a bossy fight here. Rolling through the glass window and taking a detour into the cathedral leads you to the confusingly named Altar of Despair, which turns out to be a rather calm and serene place, at the far end of which sits Ebrietas, daughter of the cosmos, her back turned to you. The creature's body is hunched over as if crying, and she is not actively hostile to you. In front of her is the subject of her mourning, the corpse of Rom, the spider remaining lifeless in front of what must have been her only friend and companion. This kinship between Ebrietas, left behind in this realm, and the simple-minded Rom is a tender sight, and it's impossible to fully grasp. The nature of the Great Ones, their relationships, and their emotions is the source of all ire in Bloodborne's world, but here it's undoubtedly tragic. Almost reluctantly, I swing my blade at the daughter, interrupting her grieving and instigating this battle. Ebrietas is an awesome boss, reminding me a bit of Seath the Scaleless with her godlike aura, but also the way you circle around her lower body and attack. Putting her down feels more like a mercy kill compared to anything else in the game. A pitiable creature imprisoned by the healing church in this forgotten, far-flung corner, trapped in her own altar of despair. Freeing her from this existence, you can approach the altar and place the pulsing lump of queenly flesh you retrieve from Kana's castle and revive Annalise, who will be restored to her hidden throne. Ebrietas must have hoped that her dear friend Rom could be revived in this same way, but it seems like the vacuous spider's consciousness has truly departed this realm. Heading back to the corpse of Mikolash and Yahalgor, we are transported into the Nightmare of Mensis. I'm just gonna say it up front, this place is the fucking worst. Yes, the pulsing frenzy-inducing lighthouse that is the brain of Mensis is a pain to deal with in this first area, but just sending it and getting to safety is relatively easy. Yes, the Mikolash boss fucking sucks, and I'm not even gonna bother talking about it because it's tedious and annoying. Yes, Kos, or some say Cosm, is actually the toughest line in this game. But really, the single worst part of this bullshit area is this fucking window, where you have to take the lift down and get off at the right time. You imagine that you should, I don't know, roll off, but I cannot tell you how many fucking times I died here just trying to safely get off onto this ledge. Seriously, what the hell is wrong with this jump? Even worse, that's just the beginning of this path. Now you have to deal with not one, not two, not even three, but 4 fucking winter lanterns. Spamming vials and sedatives as you sprint past the first 3 on the bridge is one thing. But this piece of shit blocking this chest was my final straw. Trying to sneak up or approach it quietly is literally impossible, so you just have to go full ape mode and run it down. Only for you to die, get sent back to the lamp, and then have to get off this stupid moving lift and run past the winter lanterns all over again. I can't express how much this tarnished my almost flawlessly enjoyable experience with Bloodborne up to this point. I have a burning hatred for the Nightmare of Mensis that can't be extinguished. It's just such a slog of a final level, and this offshoot path is such a frustrating resource sink that doesn't even reward you with much. The Brain of Mensis is cool though. A gross oversized winter lantern head lying harmlessly in this pitch black abyss, with its eerily human eyes tracking you as you move around it. Spamming the make contact gesture earns you its respect and a valuable moon rune, after which you can brandish your weapon and smack the brain until it dies. With the School of Mensis thoroughly dismissed, we finally arrive at the foot of Murgo's loft, where we are greeted by the familiar spirit of Queen Yharnam, hollow and gaunt, dressed in that same white wedding dress but with her belly bloody and sliced open. She looks up expectantly at the loft, as if beseeching you to put an end to this madness for good. Throughout your time in the nightmare, there has been a quiet, incessant crying from a disembodied infant, its desperation cutting through all realities. You take the lift up and see a cradle, where the queen's baby Murgo lies crying. Murgo's wet nurse materializes, an almost formless entity, with wings and scythe-like limbs. This final guardian, some sort of Great One itself, protects the child from you in what is a disappointing and anticlimactic battle. This pathetic last stand on the side of the universe's cosmic forces demonstrates just how powerful you've become, the ultimate hunter, dodging its slow-moving, slashing attacks and staying out of range of its shadow doppelganger. You handedly banish the wetness from this realm. With its surrogate mother gone, the baby continues to cry, and then it stops, and the words "Nightmare Slain" appear in front of you. Returning to Queen Yharnam, your mission fulfilled, she bows to you, grateful for freeing her child, and vanishes. Well, that was a little disappointing, wasn't it? I've never liked the Nightmare of Menses, and Murgo's wetness is the final gauntlet of this game, and I can't imagine what it must have been like for this epic to end on such a mechanically dire note. It's great then that we don't have to imagine, since we still have some more game to get through, and it's not hyperbolic to say that it contains Bloodborne's best. In classic FromSoft tradition, we get our much needed and properly cathartic third act in the form of the Old Hunters. Before we dive into the nightmare, I think it's worth quickly analyzing FromSoft's expansion so far, to better understand how Bloodborne's DLC chooses to add onto the game's esoteric narrative and foundational level design, and how successfully it achieves that balance. To start, Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree is in a completely different league and disqualifies itself of its scale, essentially acting as an Elden Ring 1.5. It entwines itself so organically with the already unfathomably large base game that the entire DLC is hard to quantify. It's a clear and massive investment of resources to give us what plays like half of a full sequel with its 11 remembrances. It goes truly beyond the norm of what's typically expected from a FromSoft DLC, and exists at the far end of what can even be considered standard in gaming. A closer comparison would be something like Dark Souls 1's Artorias of the Abyss, which is decent but also relatively contained, almost experimental in the compromises it was willing to make. Though it delivered memorable boss fights, the locations and general ambience were nothing to write home about, but I can respect its shorter length and narrative significance, expanding on the foundational lore of DS1 and also setting up the Shards of Menace to be continued in DS2's own set of DLCs. I'll stand by my opinion that the Lost Crowns DLCs for Dark Souls 2, with its 3 distinct and surprisingly dense levels, is the standard to be met, introducing new mechanical depth as well as delivering a slew of the game's best and most impressive fights. The varied vistas added to the sense of adventure in that game, and the scale of the world considerably expanded through the intricately constructed fallen kingdoms that housed each crown. The experience was simply unmatched, and provided a climax that carried the bearer of the curse to a satisfying conclusion with Vendrick, Nashandra, and Eldia. Dark Souls 3's Ashes of Ariandel and the Ring City is a double whammy, but I can't lie that Ashes feels mostly like filler except for the Sister Frida fight. The DLC on its own is incredibly lacking, but is quickly followed up by the Ring City, a massive level fit for exploration that feels like a Lost Crown DLC, an adventure at the end of the world. Even better are the battles against Medea and of course Slave Knight Gale, the real drawn Dark Soul, a duo of the strongest and one of the most atmospheric fights in any game. This tees up the Ashen One's final confrontation against the Soul of Cinder to decide the fate of the world as something genuinely epic and final. So how does Bloodborne's The Old Hunters compare? I would say it's definitely more impressive than Artorias, not as fleshed out on level design as the Lost Crowns, but delivering a run of what are easily the game's best bosses with Ludwig, Lady Maria, and of course, the Orphan of Kos. It's no Ring City or Frozen Aleum Lois, but it has the right level of lore significance and fun exploration, giving you the final piece of the puzzle in this horrific eldritch truth, and revealing Yharnam's self-heralded destruction. Up to this point, the plot of Bloodborne feels a bit disjointed and not particularly eventful, carried by its memorable levels and mechanically fun systems. The DLC starts in the most Bloodborne way possible, with the amygdala grabbing you from just outside Oedon Chapel, recognizing your possession of the blood-drunk hunter's eye, a collapsed eyeball signifying the succumbing to beasthood, before banishing you to the hunter's nightmare. You wake up in Oedon Chapel, except there's something a little different here. This first level, the Hunter's Nightmare, is a Redux Cathedral Ward, one that is not particularly strong, relying on recognizable geography and an almost glaring daytime ambiance. While the landscape is the same, it is overrun with large growths, and the sun is replaced by the cracked visage of the Astral Clock Tower, beaming down on this wasteland like a watchful eye. As you trek through these familiar grounds, the unique interaction between the ghastly old hunters, brutalizing the poor beasts in the courtyard, is harrowing, and establishes the bloodthirsty nature of this dream. A cruel purgatory for the vicious and their helpless prey who have found themselves sucked into this realm. Upon further thought, I've realized how similar the Old Hunters is structurally to Artorias of the Abyss, which makes sense as Miyazaki's follow-up attempt at DLC. You get teleported here by the amygdala grabbing you, just like Manus yanking you into the portal in Darkroot Basin. The Hunter's Nightmare itself, a time-twisted version of a base game location, mirrors the Royal Wood's rendition of Darkroot Garden. Traveling further, you come across a river of blood. Did somebody say rivers of blood? It is in this area I relinquish this hunter of his beast hunter scythe, Ah, Beast Hunter Scythe, my beloved. Now, instead of spacing enemies with the cane or swiping them into oblivion with my rapier, I can simply lunge in and dictate the pace of each battle. Such a brilliant weapon that dramatically changes how you engage enemies, and the final tool in my journey. Disgusting blood liquors litter the area, drinking from this corrupted stream. I appreciate the fresher, more visceral depiction of suffering. The mounds of moving corpses, sticky with blood, swaying and reaching towards the sky is a gnarly sight. This visage of suffering seems to be a precursor to the calcified masses we see throughout the base game, hinting at the horrific torture inflicted upon ordinary citizens by the powers that be. There's even this one guy here banging against this fallen gate, almost trance-like, a pathetic fragmentary thing not understanding the gravity of its situation. This person, reduced to their bare elements, grants you 5 blood vials for putting them out of their misery. Not far from this is a large room where Ludwig the Holy Blade waits patiently amongst a sea of corpses. The legendary church hunter warped into an indescribably cursed, horse-like form. Ludwig is one of the best bosses in Bloodborne, hands down. His first phase as a feral beast, leaping and jumping all over the arena, blindly swiping and charging at you, is probably the best beast fight in the game. His overwhelming aggression and size makes him a memorable challenge. I struggled hard on this boss, and constant losses to this first phase drained me completely of blood vials. This is the second time in the game this annoyance rears its head, and I'm forced to take a break and go farm at Murgo's Loft for 25 minutes, netting me enough blood echoes to replenish my entire stock of 600 vials. Returning to Ludwig after this slight yet annoying detour, I felt secure in dealing with the stupid berserk demon horse, knowing that I wouldn't have to farm for vials ever again. The difficulty spike embodied by this formidable boss is notable, which makes sense since Ludwig was the first hunter of the church and Gehrman's contemporary. This legendary figure in its accursed form, crazed and unrelenting, is the most gruesome beast we've faced so far, visually and mechanically. And then you bring him down to half health and this cutscene plays.
You were at my side all along. My true mentor, my guiding moonlight.
The way Ludwig's eyes light up, his humanity returning to him, the juxtaposition of his bestial side and his more human countenance, turning to face the camera. His expression displays a sort of enlightenment, having rediscovered the soothing presence of his holy moonlight sword, literally stuck to his back and by his side this whole time. With his sanity returned to him, Ludwig is now lucid, and his second phase is a majestic fight. While his physical form remains the same, he now stands upright, wielding his glowing blade with mastery and elegance as he launches rays of moonlight at you. This stark contrast to his prior animalistic behavior really burrows itself into your bones and makes Ludwig one of the coolest and most atmospheric bosses in the game, providing you both beast and man in one fucked up looking package. Fortunately, his second phase is much easier than his first, and it's not long before this renowned hunter is put down. Approaching his severed head lying next to the lantern, he grunts and neighs pathetically, before asking you if his church hunters are still the beacons of hope he had wished them to be. I tell him that they fucking suck, actually. He bemoans this generational failure and I execute him on the spot. Simon the Bowblade also shows up to warn you about exhuming the secrets of this nightmare, unsightly things that the church has worked hard to keep hidden. It often goes underappreciated, but I like this ongoing friendship with Simon. There's a sort of rivalry, but also recognition of your individual efforts to pry open the nature of the dream. It's low-key impressive that Simon is even here, skulking about this realm and trying to discover the truth himself. Retrieving Lawrence's skull from the secret altar lift, we return to the Grand Cathedral where he's lazing on his throne and chilling out. I won't waste too much breath on this Cleric Beast sequel, and fighting Lawrence the first vicar after Ludwig stirs up some huge mechanical and tonal whiplash, as you easily beat his ass while he crawls around shitting lava everywhere. The DLC's second level, the Research Hall, is if like the Prison of Hope and the Duke's Archive had a baby, except much less scary and a bit too dull for its own good. The main gimmick here is an exploratory one, making your way through numerous levels while shifting staircases and navigating its floors via alternate paths. There's a severe lack in enemy variety, however, with most of them being these patients with swollen heads, who beg for Lady Maria to save them. The eponymous research done here seems to involve flooding these subjects' brains with seawater, in hopes that they will be enlightened to the eldritch truth. Rather than eyes on the inside, their bloated heads signify an expansion of the mind, introducing the watery mirror that reflects the moon on its surface. This duality between these two forces is central to Bloodborne's narrative, and it is within these walls we begin to feel how the undercurrent is pulling us further and further from the shore, down into its ominous depths. Just like the patients here, overtaken by the drip-drip dropping of water in their consciousness, delusional and beyond saving, we are encroaching on what lurks in the deepest trenches of this nightmare. Helping Adeline, a strangely communicative patient strapped to a chair and in desperate need of brain fluid, we see the reprieve and ecstasy granted to her by this extracted murky liquid. The item description of said brain fluid gives us one of the most important reviews in the game. We fail to realize our own latent potential until the moment it is lost and sense its absence. Ironically, this is the very nature of insight, like the moment one licks one's own blood, only to be startled by its sweetness. This succinct yet viscerally evocative image explains so much of what the powers of this world are trying to achieve, a complete awareness of self, baked into our very nature, where our literal insight sight is torn between recognizing our limitless potential and the ultimate resignation that comes with trying to understand it. Potential can only ever be latent. Whatever is realized is no longer hypothetical. Mikolash says as much when greedily beseeching Kos to grant them eyes, or the existence of the incomplete brain-dead Rom, unable to truly comprehend. But perhaps that is where all of men's efforts fail. True insight can only be gained when loss is embraced, and our desires are put to death. We see this with Adeline, where after gifting her brain fluid twice, she is reduced to just an independent head, lost in her visions, and we must kill her to retrieve her brain fluid. When she unnaturally comes back to life, she is completely at peace with what she has seen, telling you about the cosmic apathy of the universe she has viewed within her own mind, comfortably adrift as if floating deep underwater. She then chooses to die, satisfied, no longer wanting, no longer knowing, perhaps ascending to a higher plane or diving into her own silent oblivion, but content nonetheless. Off the back of this remarkable vignette is a decidedly unremarkable boss, the Living Failures. I low-key got wrecked by them a couple times, but don't tell anybody that. This is basically the big brother of the Celestial Emissary, which is hardly a compliment. But I'll give this boss credit for some dedication to spectacle with the way the failures raise their arms and summon meteors crashing down all over the arena. It's one of our clearest demonstrations of truly cosmic power in this game, a striking visual that communicates the space-rending awe of the Great Ones. But you can also just hide behind this tree to shield you from this overly ambitious light show, so it's Great One 0 and Surstrong 100 at this point. It's a good thing too that this underwhelming boss is just a prelude to another of this game's best fights, and one of the most beloved throughout the entire franchise, Lady Maria of the Astral Clock Tower.
A corpse should be left well alone. Oh, I know very well how the secrets beckon so sweetly. Only an honest death will kill you now. Protect you from your wild curiosity.
This banger introduction and iconic one-liner throws us into another proper hunter-on-hunter duel against the best of the best, kind patron of the research hall and Gurman's protege. As much as I can glaze the vibes and aesthetics of this fight though, I've never really struggled with this boss. Maria's 3 distinct phases allowed the battle to ramp up visually and mechanically, with the second section introducing blood attacks and her finale adding an explosive element to her offense. But while this evolution is cool and the storytelling here with Maria leveraging her Vial blood lineage to go all out is genuinely brilliant, the difficulty of this fight feels a bit anticlimactic. She serves as a template for Sister Frida in DS3, who is a hellish boss due to the 3 separate stages with 3 separate health bars you have to whittle down, but always sticks in my mind for its sheer challenge, novelty, and spectacle. We see this archetype taken even further with Melania and Elden Ring, the pinnacle of the elegant, hyper-offensive boss that will blitz you with ridiculous combos. Perhaps you can argue it was even taken too far. But it all starts here with Lady Maria, and it's definitely a lot more manageable, with a single health bar not being particularly intimidating, but also not putting up much of a fight when you constantly apply pressure. FromSoft's penchant for bullshit and power creep is only in its nascency here, and for that I can put respect on Lady Maria's name, even if this boss fight is over before you know it. I end her with a final cinematic visceral blow. Having left this corpse the opposite of well alone, we open the path through the Astral Clock Tower into the final area of Bloodborne. where the guarded secrets of Lady Maria and the Healing Church will no doubt rise to its surface. You step out of the clock face and are deposited on the threshold of a rainy, dilapidated township, hardly worth a second glance and slowly being swallowed up by rising water. This is my single favorite reveal in the game. Up to this point, you've been sinking deeper and deeper into a horrific sea, becoming more and more unfathomable, its terror growing into something cosmic and unknowable. What began as a hunt to slay beasts has evolved into a search for mind-melting truth, a journey that we're warned again and again is not suitable for mortal comprehension. We've trudged our way through a corrosive, evil, wicked world filled with haunted cathedrals and forbidden woods and forsaken castles, decaying monuments of a dying civilization, overtaken by rot and festering with a most vile disease. You travel through all of this collapsing opulence, all of these symbols of enlightened society, wards and lecture buildings and research halls, only to pass through the astral clock tower and step out into the pelting rain. The fishing hamlet is Bloodborne's final level, an understated, almost anticlimactic footnote that instead becomes a lasting statement on conquest, erasure, and a self-serving quest for truth. It's a simple answer to a simple question. Where did all this suffering come from? Well, it came from here. A simple fishing hamlet, brutalized, buried, and lost to time. This subversion is moving, and I remember the first time playing Bloodborne and stumbling across this sequestered place, realizing the enormity of everything I've seen, every weight and every horror, rests on this little village, and its serendipitous encounter with the god that washed up on its shore. It feels so small and intimate, yet the impact of the happenings here would be so all-consuming, its tendrils spreading through not just history but the fabric of reality itself. The crimes committed here warped the nature of the world, bent it metaphysically, and unveiled its true face. All from a simple fishing hamlet. Exploring this location itself, you are endowed with a sense of palpable dread. A resident of the village walks past, cursing Byrgenwerth for the atrocities they have visited upon their town. As expected, the Healing Church is to blame for the decimation. Lawrence, Ludwig, Maria, German, Willem, all these figures were eliminated. It was their thirst for knowledge, their unchecked avarice that has raised this hamlet and left nothing but suffering in its wake. I'm reminded of the Dostoevsky quote from his novel The Brothers Karamazov. Actually, people sometimes talk about man's bestial cruelty, but as being terribly unjust and offensive to the beasts. A beast can never be as cruel as a human being, so artistically, so picturesquely cruel. The tiger simply gnaws and tears, and that is the only thing it knows. It would never enter its head to nail people to fences by their ears and leave them like that all night, even were it able to do such a thing. I think that if the devil doesn't exist, then consequently, man has created him. He has created him in his own image and likeness, just in the same way he created God in that case. The presence of overflowing water all around, the settlement drowning in a perpetual torrential rain as you trudge through its flooded paths, brings to mind again the correspondence between the moon and the waves. A divine connection, a push and pull, an ebb and flow. Here, in the hamlet, the layers of reality are shown as they are. On the outskirts of the town, we can see the presence of Yharnam under the water's surface, its spires and towers peeking through the depths, visible from this layer looking down. Looking up, the nightmare frontier must exist somewhere above, just as we peered down at the fishing hamlet from the stony cliffs in that reality, the villagers, ships, and masts broken and scattered across the white fog. This sandwiching of reality, each existing on top of each other, is allegorical to the nature of truth. In the world of Bloodborne, one must have eyes on the inside to truly grasp the base operations of its universe, an unfathomable concept reduced and communicated in this 3D plane as simple layers of existence laid atop one another. Seeing this truth for myself sent a chill down my spine. How FromSoft captures this complete disorientation and subsequent interpretation is a masterclass in visual and environmental storytelling, where you're led to decipher its meaning for yourself. It's almost inexpressible, this lack of understanding, or more accurately, a distinct resignation to the lack of understanding, submitting to the whims of an uncaring universe. It doesn't have to make sense. Moving deeper into the hamlet, we are faced with its residents, mutated fish people who have adapted to fit this watery grave. As the sole survivor, this is a narrative full circle for Sir Shuang II. He has returned home, only to find it overrun by monsters and decay. I can only imagine what he must feel to see this abysmal desolation with his own two eyes. The ominous air chokes all semblance of hope from this place as we press on through its murky waters. Crawling into this well, we come face to face with what may actually be the worst enemies FromSoft has ever designed, even more so than the Winter Lanterns, the Sharkmen. These gigantic shark-ogre hybrids are some straight-up bullshit. The ridiculous hitbox in their attacks, the constant aggression, the overbearing size, the camera not being able to keep up. It all compounds to form the single-handedly most frustrating enemy to fight in this game, and arguably across the franchise. Seriously, what the fuck is this? And then, even better, when you get this first Sharkman to half health, another Sharkman drops down from the ceiling and now you get to deal with two of them at once, throwing themselves all over the place as you desperately try to get out of their way. After getting absolutely wrecked again and again by this mini-boss duo, I decided to lock in and use my brain for once. I equipped the Shaman Bone Blade onto my item bar, got the first Sharkman to half health, and then used the Bone Blade on him just as the second beast dropped into the arena. They turned on each other immediately, and the kaiju battle that ensued was as epic as it was satisfying, watching the two tear each other apart as I watched on gleefully. Going in for the last hit was perfection, and I acquired a Rakuyo as a reward for my treacherous tactics. Turns out Lady Maria, in a flash of guilt, tossed the trusty weapon down into this well for idiots like me to get absolutely fucked by these giant fishmen. A pretty good defense mechanism, all things considered. The rest of the fishing hamlet is fortunately not as frustrating. We come across our best mate Simon at the lighthouse lantern, but unfortunately he is already on the verge of death. He passes on, frustrated to be so close to unraveling the truth of this place, only to be denied of his reprieve, remaining a seeker of secrets right to the bitter end. To avenge him, we unlock the underground cell back in the Hunter's Nightmare to deal with Brador, the church assassin who has been using his evil bell to summon evil versions of himself to invade and kill anyone seeking secrets here, determined to suppress the healing church's crimes. Yada yada, this is for Simon, you dick. I steal his strip, which is pretty much a bloodied version of the foreign attire you start the game with, except that it's fitted with the skinned hide of a cleric beast worn like a cape. We've come full circle, narrative and fashion-wise, and what is more intimidating than having this shit on as we step on the lift and descend into the dark, damp cave. Just ahead is a path leading out into the daylight. You walk through the tunnel, flanked on either side by rows of slugmen deep in prayer, as you exit out onto a vast, stony beach. Far ahead of you, a large white mass, something like the corpse of an angel, lies serenely on the waterfront, its length splayed out on the sand. Like a beach whale, the carcass sits motionless, basking in the open air, undisturbed, until it isn't. Something splits its belly from within and claws its way out, a forced cesarean that delivers a humanoid creature from the cold womb of its mother onto the sands of this ethereal beach. The Orphan of Kos slides out, slick with embryonic fluid, and clambers to its feet, the placenta still attached to its arm, calcified into a brute weapon. It looks up at the treacherous, watchful eye beaming down, the warden of its prison. It screams with an undiscernible emotion, before turning to face you. The Orphan of Kos is my favorite FromSoft boss of all time. This brutal introduction is so uncanny, so small, so sad. A thing so desperate for life crawling out of something so clearly dead. It's hard to find the right words for this birth, bereaved at its conception. The orphan's grotesque form is lanky and surprisingly human-like despite the eldritch, oceanic nature of its mother. And it feels like the fusion of man and monster, just as everything in Yharnam skews towards. The slow transformation of person into beast. The atmosphere of this boss fight feels like the culmination of everything you've done to this point. You are a hunter, a slaughterer of prey, be they gods, creatures, or men, traipsing through this nightmarish world to obliterate every foul aspect of it. And now you're faced with a true great one, the traumatic response to a massacre, in many ways an innocent creature born from strife, who can do nothing but flail and struggle against you. But struggle it will. Despite its newborn state, the Orphan is easily the hardest boss in Bloodborne, and its aggression, evasiveness, and bloodthirsty aura serves as an effective mirror held up to the hunter. This is a dance between forces of nature, beings designed simply to kill, and a deathmatch that forces everything out of you to even stand a chance. The arena itself, a large open map that allows you to fight comfortably in the shallow waters without ever obstructing you or your camera, is the fairest battleground possible. In fact, the sense of fairness is definitively baked into this fight, perhaps the single best example of it across the whole Souls catalog. There's no bullshit here, no camera to wrestle, no delayed telegraphs, no overly flashy animations, no wonky terrain. Just a boss with a readable set of attacks, perfectly tuned aggression, and comprehensible movements. It jumps, slams, casts some blood magic, and swings its placenta around like a fucking menace, but all of it can be accounted and adjusted for. The hitboxes are precise, the combos are well telegraphed, and don't chain together too relentlessly. Everything here is a deliberate cadence that only the best Sad Night boss fights can capture, except here it's a grotesque cosmic entity that wants to tear you apart. It might be animalistic, but squaring off against the Orphan of Kos feels like an elegant dance, baiting out attacks to lunge in and chip away at its health. But don't get too greedy or you will suffer the cost. Dodging and sidestepping through its deadly attacks just to seize on a small opening is immensely satisfying. And while most FromSoft bosses do this to some extent, here the smoothness of the boss's animations and movements just clicks, resonating with Bloodborne's euphoric responsiveness. All of the game systems align in harmony here, and as the boss enters its second phase, the pressure only increases. Orphan's moveset remains devastating and readable, but now with added length to account for. The camera zooms out to enable your vision when the boss lifts itself into the air and does a spectacular aerial dive. You can pay back his aggression with precision, keeping close and whittling away at his health, confidently dodging through its chaotic blows. The ambiance here is heightened by the Orphan's piercing cries and the way it trashes about, brimming with hatred. The infant lashes out wildly as if in self-defense, barely in control of its faculties. There's a desperation here that defines this battle, like a cornered creature fighting to live, leading into the miserable tone of this climactic hunt. I lost the Orphan many times, each try adapting more and more, never chalking a death up to unfairness and instead just my lack of skill. In this way, this boss feels strangely close to Sekiro, in its tuning and what it expects of you, to strip away as many elements of variability as possible and leave you to engage on the game's terms. Learning from each defeat, what attacks I can move on, how many hits I can land, keeping distance and visibility. Eventually, I prevail, and the Orphan is put down. Just like Murgo, the fight doesn't end immediately. Instead, a shadowy figure, hardly more than a wisp, waits solemnly on Kos's corpse, looking up at the sky. The Orphan waits in silence, and will wait an eternity for its mother to return home. But a hunter must hunt, and you swing your blade at the ghost. It dissipates and moves on from this plane of existence, hopefully to somewhere more peaceful. And then you are left alone on the beach, the nightmare over, the dawn breaking out through the clouds. The ocean continues to roil, reminding us of the duality of the water and the moon, tied together by invisible forces. This is the only glimpse of true daylight we see in this game, and it is a glorious sight. A sense of calm washes over you. The carcass of Kos is still here, but its weary soul returned to the sea, alongside its child. Its malice sated and leaving nothing but the sound of waves far from the shore. And with that, the old Hunters is done, and Sir Shuang II can return to the Hunter's dream, having brought peace to his home. The fishing hamlet sequestered the time, its tarnished memory finally brought to light and made clean. The lone survivor has achieved his purpose in dismantling the healing church and seeing his mission through to the end. Now, only Gurman awaits, ready to wake you from the dream if you so wish. Before that, however, there is one more secret to exhume and one more god that we must put to rest. Deep below Yharnam lies the Tomb of the Gods, a subterranean necropolis that was once home to the ancient Temerians, a race of superheroes who worshipped and lived alongside the Great Ones. We've encountered what seem to be their descendants on the surface, powerful beings like the Church Giants, Kidnappers, and perhaps Martyr Logarius himself. As an entirely optional activity you can engage with parallel to the main game, the Chalice Dungeons might be Bloodborne's most contentious addition. This separate dungeon crawling experience houses its own unique areas, bosses, enemies, and treasures. You first gain access to them after defeating the Bloodstaff beast in Old Yharnam and retrieving the Tumero Chalice, and the dungeons themselves are fixed in their difficulty, not scaling with new game plus cycles, which means it's a good time to tackle them now just before the final boss. I've only ever casually engaged with the Chalice Dungeons, using it to farm echoes or acquire certain late game gems, but I've never delved all the way down to face Queen Yharnam in the final dungeon. To be honest, I always found myself bored out of my mind after the first 3 Tumero levels, and never found a motivation to continue. But for the sake of thoroughness, this time I'm set on it. Sir Shuang will fight the Queen. Well, the base game is about literal ascension, spiraling up towards godhood through the choir, the nightmare of Menses, and Murgo's loft. And the Old Hunters presents itself like a deep descent into an oceanic abyss in search of hidden truth. The Chalice Dungeons represent another trajectory. The journey here is archaeological, anthropological. You're a tomb prospector following in the wake of those who came before, digging down physically into the stratified remains of time and civilization. There's a concrete nature to it all, and a desire to uncover and bring to light this subterranean society. Thematically, it's pretty cool. Lore-wise, there's a lot to unpack. When it comes to gameplay, however, the Chalice Dungeons are severely lacking, marred by repetitive and uninspired level design. Though you're ideally meant to start your expedition at the point you discover the first Chalice, I didn't want to get sidetracked from the main story before investing time here. As a result, the initial 2 dungeons, Tumeru and Central Tumeru, are laughably easy at this point, and doesn't leave the best first impression. These dungeons share the same dull aesthetic, following the same general flow of exploration that requires you to search for a lever that opens the boss door for that floor, before defeating said boss and descending deeper. Each dungeon has 3 or 4 levels to get through, and due to the sameness of the environments and often tedious and annoying navigation, where you need to clear out every branching path to collect the necessary materials to start the next story dungeon, moving through these steps can be a huge chore. In these first 2 dungeons, we're introduced to some new basic enemies, which spice up the combat a bit, but it's really the bosses here that provide the primary source of fun and discovery. Bosses like the Undead Giant, the Watchdog of the Old Lords, the Beast-Possessed Soul, and the Temerian Descendant are completely new challenges, unique to these dungeons. In the 3rd main dungeon, Lower Tumeru, we get to fight Rom again and it's annoying as fuck, as well as a new Bloodletting Beast, which is a cool CQC boss but hardly enough to justify the journey so far. Even by this point, the Chalice Dungeons are already buckling under the weight of repetition, and it's hard to come up with compelling arguments to defend the slog that is this first Tumeru focus section. Fortunately, this dullness is somewhat alleviated in Ailing Loran. Though structurally similar to the previous levels, the overall aesthetic of Loran, with its unnatural crackling electricity and shifting sand scattering across its catacombs, is a huge visual upgrade that draws you back into the mystery of Bloodborne's world. Loran itself was devoured by the sands and the Beast Plague a long time ago, due to their reckless abuse of the old blood, a fact that the Healing Church has either never discovered for themselves or were willfully blind to. This idea of civilizations collapsing and lying dormant underground, layered on top of each other, stratified and forgotten as each one paves over the other, is a truly engrossing concept. Just as we saw tiers of reality sandwiched one on top of the other while exploring the Nightmare Frontier and the Fishing Hamlet, this same sense of displacement is made evident here, but this time in a very literal sense. Wherever Loran lies, its succumbing to the scourge and subsequent desolation is just another story of men's proclivity for avarice, sealed away to be forgotten by time and doomed to be repeated. Exploring this ailing place, it's easy to imagine the cycle of this world, always tempted, always in peril, never sated in its pursuit of knowledge. The swirling forces of nature here serve up some of the most visually striking elements in the game, and it's uniquely memorable for this change-up, though it's coming a bit late. The Bloodstuff Beast fight here is intense, but it's also a nice reminder to see how far I've come in combat, easily dealing with the boss who at the start of the game felt quite unmanageable at times. Facing off against the Abhorrent Beast, another unique Chalice boss, hammers home this fact. It's a sick boss that you almost have to box with, staying close and dodging and weaving, but easily prevailing. The Cursed and Devout Chalice is the most memorable part of the Chalice Dungeons, made notable by how your health is cut in half while exploring its layers. There's a clear change of pace here where you have to be extremely cautious with your skulking around, and you can get one-shot constantly by basic enemies and traps. This dungeon is one of my favorite bosses in the entire game against the Watchdog of the Old Lords, made absolutely brutal due to your severed health. I love the Watchdog because you are so frail here, where failing to avoid an attack will likely kill you instantly. This forces you to really engage with the boss and learn to read its moveset with precision. The margin for error is at its smallest here than anywhere else in Bloodborne, and I struggled the most on this single boss than anything else in the game. Learning to play it safe, utilize spacing, recognize the boss's telegraphs, it all combines for a deeply satisfying battle, one where you start with an excruciating hopelessness and willfully approve each attempt. The Watchdog is fast and punishing, lashing out at you with a slew of attacks that you must dodge in order to survive, creating, again, a sort of Sekiro rhythm in its pure, unadulterated difficulty. The way the boss aggroes at low health, becoming even more aggressive and lethal, really tests your ability to lock in. After many tries and very sweaty palms, I managed to beat this big dog, with my heart rate at an all-time high and an unexpected addition to my favorite Souls bosses. Surprisingly, the following battle against Amygdala I found to be much easier. Its looming form in the massive arena allowed for more leeway, where you can keep your distance and bait out opportunities to counterattack. The camera also works in your favor here, zooming out considerably to keep the cosmic being in frame. It's a pretty epic battle, but after the game-defining struggle against the Watchdog, it's nice to easily demolish its trypophobia-inducing face. Finally, we get to Tumeru Hill, at the bottom of which awaits Queen Yharnam. The only other memorable encounter here is the fight against the Bloodletting Beast, except here a parasite erupts from its head when its health drops below half. It's quite reminiscent of the Immortals in Sekiro, which is a surprising aesthetic shift, but doesn't really add much difficulty to the battle. After all this effort, we finally come face to face with Yharnam, Queen of Tumeru. This secret boss hidden away at the end of the Chalice Dungeon grind is no doubt a cool discovery. The battle itself is pretty straightforward, with Yharnam utilizing her blood attacks and summoning clones of herself to assist her. The size of the arena and her uncomplicated moveset makes her simple to deal with. Her attack that causes you to float into the air adds some spectacle, but buffing your weapon with some paper and going to town, punishing her lack of aggression, wears her down quickly. After everything we've seen in this game, this feels like tying up a final loose end. Remembering how she wept at the arrival of the Blood Moon and a solemn vigil at the bottom of Murgo's loft, bowing to you for freeing her stillborn child. The story of Bloodborne is the tragedy of her and her offspring. But while this act of closure carries a lot of narrative weight, the Chalice Dungeons as an activity overall are kind of lame. Despite some deepening of the lore and some memorable boss encounters, traversing the dungeons themselves is just too mechanically boring, not offering enough variety in its moment-to-moment gameplay to justify the amount of time you spend plunging its steps. It is simply too repetitive, with the act of exploring these layers becoming tedious and downright arduous at points, especially when you accidentally miss some materials that stops you from progressing. While the atmosphere is oppressive and fitting, and the tomb prospecting element as a narrative vehicle is quite novel, I just don't think it's a particularly strong concept. The uninspired dungeon crawling doesn't really suit a linear narrative-led single-player game, where farming blood gems is not much of a motivation beyond pure PvP optimization, unlike something primarily loot-focused like Nioh 2 with the heavier RPG-leaning gear chase and mission-based grind. Here, it feels like an underbaked implementation that perhaps could have been saved by being built out into a proper expansion. I can't deny that it would have been awesome to see this plot involving the Queen, Temeru, and the material history of the world incorporated into the main story, just as the Old Hunters so confidently does. We could have explored another avenue of the Great One's saturating dominance, this time through the ages, naturally exploring the foundational myths and ceaseless corruption of the Old Blood, like the truth of the Old World before the Healing Church versus the truth of the New World exposed in the Old Hunters. With a more distinct visual identity like the vistas were exposed to in Ailing Loran, the unique enemies and bosses could have worked beautifully in their own handcrafted levels, but diving through each forgotten civilization could have been unraveled through FromSoft's phenomenal environmental storytelling. Bosses like the Abhorrent Beast, the Watchdog, and Queen Yharnam would have been better served by a clearer and more engaging structure, alongside more diverse levels that bring to life this subterranean labyrinth with its anomalous weather and wide chasms and unique architecture. I don't think they were far off with what they achieved here with the Chalice Dungeons, and the final product clearly had a different goal in mind with how it was designed. But it would have been a dream come true to see this rather sinewy morsel fleshed out into a full DLC. Of course, that isn't the reality we live in, and while I'd like to concede and say it's fine because the Chalice Dungeons are optional and skippable, that's not really the case since FromSoft decided to put exclusive bosses and encounters down there, forcing it into a weird limbo space where to get everything out of Bloodborne, you have no choice but to dive in, despite the overall experience here being much weaker and frankly boring, especially when compared to the rest of the game. With our expedition through Temeru brought to a regicidal close, there's nothing left to do but face Gehrman at the foot of the tree, as the door instructs us to. Our job is done, and the original hunter wants to free us of our servitude. Before doing that, however, we must consume 3 of the 3rd umbilical cords we have rather unethically sourced throughout our journey. 1 from the abandoned workshop, 1 from murdering Ariana's celestial child, and 1 from Murgo's wet nurse. Every infant Great One has this precursor to the umbilical cord, the item description says, and eating them prepares us for what's to come. It's a beautiful sight, strolling into the field of flowers where Gehrman awaits us. On the left, the hunter's dream burning endlessly. On the right, the large moon hanging low in the sky. In the middle, a massive tree that reaches high, strong and unyielding. Approaching the old man, he offers to wake you from this dream. You refuse this mercy, of course, making an enemy of the first hunter.
Dear, oh dear. What was it? The hunt? The blood? Or the horrible dream? Oh, it doesn't matter. It always comes down to the hunter's helper to clean up after these sorts of messes. Tonight, Gehrman joins the hunt.
I think Bloodborne easily has the most quote-worthy lines from any FromSoft game. This is a climactic tete-a-tete, squaring off against this legendary figure, a wheelchair-bound and senile old man who reveals himself to be the ultimate beast-killing weapon, the first of his kind. With his burial blade in hand, Gehrman zips around the field, but we've faced enough hunters at this point to make light work of him. There isn't much to do except to go all out, and Gehrman falls quick. With the anchor of the dream dead, the moon presence descends, another great one, the one they call Pale Blood, what you've been seeking for this whole time. The entity embraces you, attempting to reassert dominance and subsume you, to make you a replacement for Gehrman so the dream can persist. but you repel its affection, having consumed the umbilical cord and grown too powerful in this long night of the hunt that this nefarious being has orchestrated. I like that the Moon Presence's design has all the bestial properties we've come to know throughout our journey in Yharnam. This Great One is the obvious source of the scourge, warping the physical forms of men into something feral and hungry, uncaging the frame that lies within. It is but one in a pantheon of hidden gods that we've encountered, yet its oppressive, uncaring influence is more than enough motivation for us to end this deity's reign here. After all, you've killed countless beasts. What's one more? The Moon Presence goes down easy, hardly standing a chance against your might. In a final twist, we see the doll pick up a meek, slug-like creature, small and harmless. This is you, reincarnated as a newly birthed Great One, a true ascension. There's no more seeking, no more questions. There's nothing more to know. You've transcended your mortal shell. Congratulations. Now, go do it all over again. After all, a hunter must hunt. Bloodborne is undeniably peak. Its position as one of the greatest games of all time is not hyperbolic or an exaggeration, it really is just cold hard truth. From its buttery smooth combat to its cosmically unraveling world to its oppressive and unmatched atmosphere, Bloodborne truly is a one-of-a-kind experience, even amongst the pedigree it exists within. This game is arguably the crowning jewel in FromSoft's astoundingly gilded brow, a catalog so chock full of bangers that it's hard to fathom just how good we've been eating over this last decade and a half. It is, in many ways, the actual Dark Souls 2, a clear continuation of Miyazaki's thought process and vision and desire to evolve the formula, to further understand and unlock its potential. It feels like a true spiritual sequel in that it boldly aims for new heights, new themes, presenting an inverse of the sun and fire mythos of Dark Souls with its centering of the moon and of water. It's been over a decade since Bloodborne arrived on the scene, and it itself is like a Great One in a constant but influential state of prolonged existence. It just doesn't stay dead, an unparalleled, timeless experience that can be tackled at any point, and your life is just so much richer for it. There will always be people like me who decide to pick it up, whether it's from the overwhelmingly positive discourse, to conversations about a potential remaster and how it would never happen, or just a morbid curiosity in experiencing the Souls genre at what many consider its zenith. It seamlessly transcends its medium, just as it portrays man trying to break free of its own chains and ascend to a higher state. A game whose presence is always felt and never left well alone for long. It isn't an overstatement to say that Bloodborne changed my life. Not in a grand, spiritual, or religious way, but in a more subtle manner, shifting my mind towards a more meditative, somber approach to the vastness of the world around me, like being roused from a gentle sleep. Life is simply different after playing this game. It sounds stupid, but the night has never really been the same since, like I've been awakened to a new appreciation for the cosmos. The same way you read a book about astronomy or the ocean and feel that sense of scale and individual insignificance, but communicated through a video game. It's almost absurd how well Bloodborne captures this sense of unknowability, trepidation, and absolute wonder. Incomprehensibility is an alluring thing. When I'm half asleep in a liminal state, I sometimes think of Yharnam. The images it has burned into my retinas will never leave me, and I realize that maybe I have eyes on the inside now too. It's not just that blood moon I saw earlier in March. There are times I take the trash out and stop to look up at that white disc, linger on its glow, thinking about its invisible, undeniable pull. I am entranced by how it reflects light and exists in shadow, set against a dark void of emptiness. Sometimes I drive down by the sea and I catch myself staring out at the waves, mesmerized by the shimmering surface and the ebb and flow of that same undetectable lunar presence, beneath which is another abyss we remain complete strangers to. Suddenly, I'm back in the fishing hamlet, on the sand where God itself has washed up from the depths. Standing on that beach, looking up at the dawn breaking through the clouds, the water calm and the air still. The moon is nowhere to be seen, its influence on the tide diminished but never truly gone. The eternal movement of the water a constant reminder of its presence. It is this vast, unknowable ocean that remains, perpetual and silent, all through the day and all through the night, and through all of time and history. Even when the sun rises and the hunt ends, the sea will continue to roil and churn, and the unfathomable nature of the world will remain right here, just out of reach, where one can always dip their toes but never travel far, lest you be swallowed whole with no port to return to.
Sweet child of Kos, returned to the ocean. A bottomless curse. A bottomless sea. Accepting of all that there is and can be.
Hey y'all, thanks for getting to the end of the video. Bloodborne fucking rocks, man. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and comment your thoughts so that the great algorithm can be appeased. I'm trying to hit 10,000 subscribers this year and I can use all the help I can get. Huge shout out to my patrons, King Jaden, Jen AI should constitute jail time, Nicholas Chow, Rice J11, and Knee Lost. Thanks for all the support so far. If you like my content and would like to support me further on Patreon, the link will be at the end of the video and also in the description. These videos are a solo effort, so I really appreciate your patience between uploads so I can make them as good as they can be. With Bloodborne done, the next one is going to be on Dark Souls 3, so stay tuned for that. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.